Hello, ethical hackers. In bug bounty hunting, you need to find the road less traveled. That way, you will reduce the probability of getting your reports duped. Today, we will see how we can explore, find, and exploit hidden assets using attacks against HTTP host headers. And we will apply our knowledge on one of the Portswigger Academy attacking labs. I'm so excited about this, so let's get started. Okay, so first of all, why host header? Why should we care about attacking it? Well, in bug bounty hunting, you need to find the road less traveled. That way, you will reduce the probability of getting your reports duped, meaning that another bug bounty hunter has already found what you've reported, and so you won't get any credit for it. So it's very important to find assets which are under-tested. And usually when you find that asset, you don't need to dig deeper because most of them generally contain low-hanging fruits. So it's quick wins for you when you find those hidden assets. First question is how to find those assets in the first place. One of the techniques that are used is what we call HTTP host header. But what is HTTP host header in the first place? Well, as you can see here in this beautiful diagram from Portswigger Academy, it's a HTTP header, as you can see here, that points to the exact web application that the client wants to access. So you would ask me, why do we need this? Isn't the IP address or the domain name enough to reach that application? Well, it used to be that case when we didn't have cloud services or virtual hosting where one server hosted one application, but it's not the case anymore. Nowadays, we have one server which hosts dozens or millions of web applications. When you type your domain.com, the IP address you get for that domain is the one of the server which is hosting it. But once the IP packet reaches that server, it needs to know which application to forward this to. And to do that, we use the host header. This is also another pattern which is found in corporations. You have a public application, for example, which is reachable when you type the domain name, but there are also internal applications which are hosted behind a reverse proxy. So the client wants to reach example.com. Transparently, the traffic goes through a reverse proxy, which in turn forwards the request to the target server. The problem is when there is a poor configuration at this point, an attacker might be able to trick the reverse proxy into forwarding the requests to an internal application. So imagine that you are a bug bounty hunter and you have access to this web application. When you tamper with the host header, in the hope that your traffic gets through a reverse proxy or the server hosting multiple applications, you might end up finding a hidden asset which is full of web vulnerabilities because no one else had thought of changing the host header. So how to actually test that? Well, it's really straightforward. Let's do that together. I'm going to choose a lab from the Portswigger Academy labs, and let's choose the routing-based SSRF. So in this case, we have the same scenario as we've seen in the previous diagram. A reverse proxy which is routing the traffic to the main web application, but because it's misconfigured, we can abuse that to reach an internal application. In this case, that would be the internal admin panel. Alright, let's access the lab and start hacking it. So here we are on the main web application. So imagine that this is the target that you are testing as part of your bug bounty hunting session. The first thing I'm going to do is change the proxy to my burp instance. And as you do in every web application testing, you start discovering the application. So I'm going to the home page, then the login feature. Then back to the home page, I see some details about the products, and I guess that's it. It's a pretty small web application, so I don't have any vulnerabilities. Maybe there was a SQL injection, but other bug bounty hunters have already found that. It's already fixed. And because it's a small web application, we don't have much to test. So how can we find some hidden assets that bug bounty hunters didn't find before? Well, let's use the host header technique. I'm going to choose this request. As you can see, it's pointing to the web application which we have been using, this one. So let's send this to the repeater and try to play with it. Let's send it once more. We have the content of the page. All right. So what we can do now is change the host header to something else. Let's try a random domain. We have a gateway timeout, and the server error tells us that we cannot connect to the specified domain. This is weird because now we know that there is a reverse proxy in between our client and the web application. Sounds interesting. So let's use Burp Collaborator client to verify if we indeed can reach other resources. So you just go to Burp and then click on Burp Collaborator client. We will copy one subdomain to our clipboard and then go back to the repeater and just plug that into the host header. So as you can see, it's pointing to burpcollaborate.net. If a request is coming into this host, we would see some requests in the logs of Burp Collaborator. So let's send that. Click on Poll Now. And right away, you see that we have two DNS requests followed by a HTTP request, which means that the reverse proxy has tried to resolve our host, in this case, this long subdomain of burpcollaborator.net domain. Once it had the IP address, a HTTP request has been sent to our server, the Burp Collaborator. In the description, we read that the collaborator server received an HTTP request from this IP address on that time and date. And what's more important is that the body of the HTML page contains whatever message returned by our burp host. That's interesting. We might be tempted to report it as it is, but be warned, there is currently no impact. All we have proved is that we can specify arbitrary host values and have the reverse proxy fetch them. So what if we can access an internal application? In the lab, we had this internal range that might contain a live application. So let's try to brute force. I'm going to copy that range, and now we will send this to the intruder. I'm going to clear everything out, remove the URL, because we want to reach the root path of the target application. And what we are after here is the host header. So I'm going to paste my range, and because this is a /24, this means that the IP addresses range from 192.168.0.1 until 255. So what we are after here is the last byte. I'm going to add a placeholder here. And in the payloads, I'm going to choose the numbers type. We will use the sequential numbers from 1 to 254 with a step of 1. We want no fractions, so we will specify 0, and that way we have examples of how the payloads would look like. And then start the attack. We have a warning here saying that the host header doesn't match the specified target host, which is fine for us because this is what we are after. Let's ignore that message. Okay, after the intruder has finished, we can filter by length to see if we found any outlier. And sure enough, we have a .55, which returned a redirection to /admin. So that's interesting. That's an asset in what seems to be an internal network. So let's send this request to the repeater and play with it. Instead of the root, we will just go to /admin. And it seems that we have a button which says delete user. So let's render the page to see that clearly. So as you can see, we have username and then delete user. So what I want to do now is try to see that in my web browser because that would be more elegant. And to do that, I need to change the host header to this value wherever I go to the main web application. So let me copy this value and go to proxy options. And I'm going to use the match and replace feature. I'm going to target a request header and match host with whatever comes after it. I'm going to check regular expression match and replace it with host and the value of my internal application. Let's hit OK and make sure that it's checked. Now, if I go to my lab and make sure that I have my burp connected to my browser, I should be redirected to /admin. So it says here, error, too many redirects. Let's just copy this URL of the web application and choose /admin. All right, so now we have something. Client error forbidden. So from what we've seen in the request that we've been playing with, we have a path to /admin/delete. So let's try to see if there is a get request instead of a post. Nope, it doesn't work. So I think maybe we need to just go ahead and play with it from burp. So I'm going to use post delete. And there is a input field called csurf with this value. We need to add this. And we have another input, which is called username, which we need to add. Let's use whatever username we want, just a random value to see how it works. And I think we're good to go. Let's send this. Oh, it seems that we have a redirection. Maybe the username has been deleted and the request has been processed. In the lab instructions, we need to delete user Carlos. Okay, let's change the username to Carlos and then send. We have a 302 redirection. We don't know what happens. Let's use a lowercase. Okay. Let's refresh to see if we've indeed solved the challenge. All right, we've solved it. We've seen how vulnerable this internal application is. It first leaked the csurf token and the path to arbitrary user deletion. And just like that, we were able to delete the user Carlos through a reverse proxy which didn't validate the host header. Notice that it really depends on what you can find using this technique. In this case, we were able to find an internal application which was really vulnerable. Other times, you might abuse cache poisoning or cross-site scripting. It really depends on how the system is configured. To discover more about this vulnerability, I highly recommend you read the Portswigger white paper, Cracking the Lens, Targeting HTTP's Hidden Attack Surface by James Kettle. It talks in depth about a methodology that he followed to exploit so many targets and earn a healthy $33,000 along the way. A good portion of the article talks about the techniques that are used to test for host header injection, either accessing internal applications or abusing some weird behaviors of how those reverse proxies were configured. There are so many techniques you can learn from, so I highly recommend you read it. If you found this content helpful, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel so that you get updates whenever I publish a new video on ethical hacking and bug bounty hunting. If you're new to hacking and want to learn the basics, check out the free OWASP Top 10 theory and hands-on training on thehackerish.com and apply your knowledge on the lab which supports it. If you enjoy learning with videos, I invite you to watch the OWASP Top 10 YouTube playlist. However, I encourage you to first try to solve the lab exercises so that you don't spoil them. Don't forget that there are supporting blog posts for most of the videos you watch on this YouTube channel. I also encourage you to subscribe to the Friday newsletter on thehackerish.com to gain some new hacking knowledge at the end of the week. If you enjoy listening while doing other things at the same time, check out the Hack for Fun and Profit podcast, link in the description box. Until next time, Stay curious, keep learning, and go find some bugs.